Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here, have an opportunity to speak to the Chesapeake chapter, the world-renowned, obviously, APMP Chesapeake chapter. So I'm glad I have the opportunity to be here today. As Brenda said, the topic is From Bidding to Winning with Generative AI. The roots of this presentation lie in an article that I recently did for the Professional Services Council for their conference a few weeks ago. And it's the idea that we're all starting to use generative AI for proposal work. Give you some stats here in a few minutes. Um, but there's a difference between generating proposals and winning proposals. And that's really what I'm going to focus on. So that'll be the core of our topic today that I'll be circling back to regularly is on the difference between bidding and winning. Just a quick bio, and again, Brenda, I appreciate the introduction. I do want to make one point. I teach Lofeld's class on using generative AI to write proposals. For proposal professionals is the official title. I come at it very much from the user point of view. There are lots of platform vendors out there and software engineers and AI scientists and people like that who are building these great tools. They are really amazing. And when you think about where we were maybe just 3 years ago, where using AI to write was unheard of. And then where we are today, where you can acquire a platform that will literally do 95% of your proposal. Whether your win's a different question, but will certainly do a lot of your proposal work. It's an amazing state of change that we live in, and it's an amazing time that we live in. Uh, I come at this from the user point of view. Although I'm an engineer, I've got, as Brenda said, 30 plus years of proposal and BD related experience. That sounds like a lot. It's pretty junior at Lofeld. I'm at, probably the bottom of the experience thermometer there, but it gives me a pretty good base to work from. And my interest is real in using generative AI to write and win bids. So that's very much my focus here. Let me just give you a quick overview. In terms of the industry today, we've done a couple surveys with Lofeld, looking at LinkedIn and people in the GovCon community. And today, what percentage of users on LinkedIn in our community are adopting GenAI? And the number right now is about 70%, probably a little bit higher than that. Now, when I say adopting GenAI, I mean either using it, actually have acquired an instance, whether it be their own in-house product or leased software as a service or a model that they've bought, whatever they've done, or they're in the process of making a platforming decision. They've committed to the path. They haven't quite decided perhaps what platform to use, or maybe they're still bringing their workforce up to speed, but it's well over 70%. And I think we're actually at a point now where in the next 12 months or so, you're going to see a division emerging between the haves and the have-nots. And those companies that have really made the deliberate decision not to start down the path of Gen AI are going to find that that gap is going to widen over time. So that's really something to consider. Um, that 70% number is very consistent with very broad-based surveys in general about the adoption of generative AI across all industries. There are surveys by companies like Gartner and McKinsey. I kind of put that to, I think, substantiate that claim. Lots of companies are incorporating Gen AI as in their value chain, in their workflows, if you will, to accomplish work better, faster, cheaper, and in turn realize the value that that brings. And there's, lots of implications. Specifically for proposal related work, we have to really answer a couple questions here to understand the difference between just bidding and winning. Because GenAI is a powerful tool for writing proposals, but that is not assurance of writing winning high quality proposals. What I call the difference between good and great. You can write a good proposal with GenAI relatively easily. Writing a great proposal, at least with the current state of technology, the current ability of the platforms. And I think, probably for the next, I don't know, 2 to 5 years, I think that's going to remain pretty much fixed. You need human participation and appropriate use of your GenAI tool to consistently write winning bids and to raise your win rate. And that's really what's important. Companies can see now immediately the efficiencies you gain from using GenAI because it writes really well and really fast. You can get to a first draft with Gen AI in a matter of minutes instead of days. That's just a fact. There are enormous savings there. But you can't save your way to growth. To grow, you need to win more. To win more, you need to bid more and or you need to increase your win rate. And preferentially, you want to increase your win rate. You want to see your company growing into new areas, expanding to adjacent business space, taking some, well-judged risks and winning those opportunities as well. So that's what really it takes to be great in order to accomplish that kind of strategic objective, strategic growth. To do that, You need to learn how to use generative AI to outscore your competitors. Now, most of the companies on this call, I suspect, are bidding on best value determinations. LPTA, low price, technically acceptable, it's really kind of gone out of favor. It's really only used very much for commodity acquisition, if you will. Okay, but best value remains kind of the standard, especially for what I would call custom acquisitions, something specifically suited for a government agency's needs. And to win a best value determination, you have to find the right balance point between outscoring your competitors on the non-cost components of your proposal and price. You have to find that right balance point. And ideally, you'll have so much differentiation and offer a product in your proposal, described in your proposal, that will outscore your competitors by enough. You can even charge a premium on price. You don't have to be the lowest bidder to win. You could be in second place or third place on price, okay, and still win if you outscore your competitors on the non-cost score. So that's really things that are happening. Now, we're also, again, very much in a transitional time here, and just in terms of acquisition in general. I mean, even the charts today are a little bit out of date. I'll talk that here in just a moment about what's just changed in really the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, I think, perhaps. Clearly, customers in the government are going to demand greater cost effectiveness and speed from industry in writing proposals. They're going to give us shorter timelines and they're going to expect higher quality. That's just a given. So these are things you need to keep in mind as well as you continue asking yourself, are you going to continue doing proposals the same old way? Or are you going to use Gen AI, but not learn how to use Gen AI to be outstanding at proposal writing? You can't be satisfied with just mediocrity. Mediocrity is not going to win. So to take your proposal from good to great, what does that mean? It means we have to go beyond compliant and responsive to what we call compelling. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with these words here, and I'll give you some definitions here in just a moment. Um, we tend to be very focused on compliance and to a great extent responsive. I'll give you those definitions in just a minute. We are consumed with submitting the compliant bid because none of us want to be disqualified for being non-compliant. But the fact remains that compliant and responsive are not enough to win because that gives you no assurance that you're going to outscore your competitors on the non-cost component of your submission. So the question we want to answer then today is how can we use BD domain-aware GenAI platforms to take ourselves from beyond compliant and responsive to compelling? Now, I've used a couple words here I want to clarify. When I say GenAI platform, it means it's an AI tool. It is generative in the sense that it is capable of creating new content. It is built around a computing component, if you want to call it that, called the large language model. We don't need to get into the details of that at all. If you're interested, take the class that I offer, and we'll give you some time on that and explain it a little bit better. The other important thing to note on this chart is BD domain aware. What does that mean? Now, I suspect many, if not all of you, have heard of public platforms like ChatGPT or Anthropic Claude or Google Gemini or Facebook's Meta platform called Llama. There are lots of public platforms out there. I'll just give you a foot stomp that I'll repeat from some of the classes that I teach. Do not use public platforms to do your company's proposal work. The GenAI platforms don't learn from you. They don't learn, but the vendors who run those platforms, unless you have a contract that says to the contrary, the vendors record your interaction and they have the right to use the record of that interaction as input to create the next generation of platforms. So if you put your proprietary data out there into a public platform, there is a risk it'll be recorded and reused and become part of the training data, the knowledge base, if you will. It's not quite accurate to describe Gen AI, but it becomes part of the knowledge used to create that next generation AI model, in which case it is now out in the wild and out of your control. You have compromised your proprietary data or your personally identifiable information for that matter as well. So you need to be very judicious in deciding how you're going to use generative AI to help you write winning proposals. Now, domain aware means that you have taken on and are working with a custom designed platform that knows about GovCon BD. It knows about the FAR. It knows about what a transition plan is. It knows about technical and management environments. It's got a base of knowledge built into it that makes it a specialist in GovCon proposal and capture related works. That's very, very powerful thing. And the public models do not have that. There are about 10, 15 vendors today that have created and are selling BD domain aware Gen AI platforms. And we're going to really focus on what's the difference and how do we create those and what does that mean? Now, just to give you kind of then the overall thesis that I'm working my way up to here, it's clear that generative AI can help you be more productive. I think that that has been largely proven to user satisfaction. You can write drafts and do a number of other proposal and capture related tasks very, very quickly using Gen AI. And it does, it's amazing it writes beautifully. I mean, I got to give the scientists who created this credit. These tools are very, very powerful at writing well. Okay. But that doesn't mean they know how to write high quality, winning proposal content. And in fact, it's a government concern. They don't want to be inundated with mediocre Gen AI template stamped out proposals because those proposals don't explain clearly to the government what is best about your offering and why you deserve to be selected as the awardee. So they don't want mediocrity being submitted. I anticipate we're going to see some changes in how the government evaluates and also structures acquisitions in order to prevent exactly that phenomenon. Okay. So we don't want to just be more productive and more efficient so we can bid more. Why bid more mediocre work? We want to learn to use Gen AI to write winning proposals that are compelling. Okay. But that's still something we're learning how to do in the industry. Now, there are vendors out there who will tell you, hey, you just give us your information, access to your library, plug it all in, we'll crank out the winning proposal for you 95% complete. I have not arrived at that school of thought yet. I think more flexibility is still required. And I think the human element in creating the compelling proposal content is still required. I think you can get very quickly to a 70%, 75%, maybe 80% high quality draft, but that last 20, 25% requires human intervention and human action. Now, there's some general procurement trends out there, and this is a chart I said I mean I can't update this chart fast enough. These were trends as of about 2 weeks ago. We're going to see multi-phase evaluation processes. I think we're going to see more orals. These are measures that, in part, are designed to protect the government from being inundated with mass-produced, mediocre, Gen AI created content. Okay, so by multi-phase evaluation process, you may have gates. You have an initial gate. You have to provide some fact-based data that, basically qualifies you. And when you qualify, then the government will notice you and say, hey, you are now eligible to submit your actual technical and written proposal. We see more and more self-scoring proposals, especially the GWACs, where you have a large consumer base of companies that want to participate. You can, provide the government affirmation that you've got a series of qualifications, and if you score high enough, then you have the opportunity to win the IDIQ and then compete on the subsequent delivery orders. Uh, Oral evaluations, I think the government is going to substitute watching your proposal team in action live for written content. I think we're going to see more and more of that. There are a number of operational trends. I think we see these both on the industry and on the government side, right? Digital transformation, IT modernization. Gen AI is a big part of that. By the way, when I say Gen AI, that's short for generative artificial intelligence, just my personal acronym that I use. But more and more companies are embedding Gen AI into their workflow, and we see it in the government. If you go to the GSA website, they've identified on their website 4 different Gen AI tools they're now using for proposal evaluation type activities. And again, a number of other things as well that, some of them came out of the pandemic from 5 years ago, supply chain resilience, and the need to be able to, keep your supply chain intact, maintaining cost controls and again, maintaining efficiencies, improving infrastructure, so on and so on. Now, even in the last few days, you may have heard that the government is now engaged in an effort to redefine the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation. There's the RFO, which is the FAR overhaul, right? That's already begun. The government's already, I think, identified 3 FAR parts to revise. The goal is to minimize the FAR itself down to basically the statutory requirements only. And I think everything else is kind of got into a wound up in some kind of assisted guidance that contracting officers can have the option of using or not, as long as they conform to the statutory requirements. Okay, so even that is a fast moving train. And hopefully you're all aware of that as well. You need to pay close attention because a lot of the FAR today is based on best practices from experience gained in all these years of government acquisition. A lot of that content is going to be removed and kind of made available as an option to contracting officers. But what does it mean when the government starts acquiring capabilities based on just those things required by statute? That's a different question entirely, and again, a future subject perhaps. So your proposal is good when it's compliant and responsive. Here are the definitions. Okay. So you're compliant, you've got all the requirements checked off. You've got a response to every requirement. And you're responsive when you provide meaningful content in those responses. The government evaluators can look at it and say, yes, have, given me information that helps me understand your ability to address the requirement. Okay. That is necessary, but not sufficient to win best value. There are too many companies out there that are very, very good at proposal related work and capture related work for that matter, too. Also, when I say proposal, capture is almost included in my thought process when I say that. If you want to win best value, another layer is required. You need to be compelling to win consistently in a best value determination, at least today, under today's FAR, and as determined by contracting officers who prepare the acquisition packages, the solicitations. Okay, you have to outscore your competitors, and you do that by scoring strengths in the proposal evaluation. Now, Lofeld's adopted a best practice called strength-based winning, which is an approach that I would say Lofeld feels is proven to help you maximize your non-cost score by generating the largest number of strengths that you can. That is the essence of it. You have to identify features in your offering that will be scored as strengths. You want a feature-rich proposal. You have to frame those features with supporting information. For instance, you want to identify risks and how they've been mitigated. You want to show the customer you understand how that feature will positively impact them, what the benefit will be to them. You need to provide proof that what you're proposing actually works. So this is really at the core of writing a compelling proposal. You can't just submit something. I know one company says, we want to have beautifully written proposals. And I'm like, well, there's no harm in it beautifully written, but you're not going to win with beautifully written. To win, you need to outscore your competitors. To outscore your competitors, you need to score strengths in your proposal. That also reflects an understanding of how evaluators read your proposal. I say read advisedly. Let's put that in quotation marks. Evaluators, generally speaking, don't read proposals. They get assigned a section and they score it. They are looking for strengths, weaknesses, and deficiencies. And they're going to give you a score based on it. And at the end, all those scores of your proposal get rolled up into an assessment. And that assessment reflects the strengths, weaknesses, and risks and deficiencies present in your offering. And that will ultimately form the basis of the determination. Okay, so it's really not about reading proposals, it's about scoring. You need to frame your proposal content so not only are the strengths in there, but that evaluators can find them and will score them. So we at Lowfeld have defined a quality structure. Okay, we teach this in our strength-based winning course. Okay, there are a number of things you got to do. I've mentioned already, as you can see on the left. Yes, you have to be compliant. Yes, you have to be responsive. Those are now table stakes. Okay, there are a number of other things you must do in order to win. And to win, I mean, take your proposal to the level of being compelling. It needs to have customer focus. It needs to be strengths driven, compelling. It needs to be easy for evaluators to find and reward you for your strengths. Okay. And to do that, it needs to be well written and visually appealing because otherwise the evaluators fall asleep. It's hard to attend to your proposal, let alone give you the score that you deserve. Generative AI can help you in that quality structure that I outlined just a moment ago in order to help you write the winning, high scoring on the non-cost side proposal. But there's some things you have to know about its capabilities and limitations. Again, we focus very much on our training in these couple areas here. One is that people mistake generative AI for a database or for software. It is neither. Okay. It is a language-driven writing capability. Yes, it has an enormous amount of general knowledge in it because it is trained on a lot of knowledge, but it is not a fact repository. It's based more on statistics and probabilities of language. Okay, and I don't want to go into it much further than that. But it really has two if I will, superpowers. Okay. One, as I mentioned before, GenAI is great at writing. You give it a request to write something, and it will write something, and it will almost always be well written. And by that, I mean syntax, grammar, spelling, number, all those things that make for good writing, paragraph structure, all those things are very powerfully implemented in GenAI platforms. They write really, really well, and they keep getting better too. I mean, it's amazing how good they are. If you want to, the platform I recommend, if you want to really see just how well they write, is the Anthropic Claude platform. There's, free demos you can set up for yourself online if you want to experiment with it. But again, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, they all write really, really. Microsoft Copilot, they all write well. They're all built for different purposes. I don't want to get into that here, but they all write really, really well. The second superpower that I haven't mentioned yet is that GenAI can ingest unstructured textual information from multiple sources and synthesize it and then write about it, draw inferences and conclusions, give you suggestions and ideas, work with that diverse body of knowledge. That's very, very powerful for capture. We as capture managers to walk around with an enormous cognitive load, all the things they're supposed to know and remember about the customer and competitors and what's going on in the world and regulation and statute, all those sorts of things. If you can get those into your GenAI platform, it can have access to that knowledge, search it in ways that are based on meaning, not word search, which is kind of, I think, going out of date here in the next 5 to 10 years, and then draw conclusions from it or work with that corpus of raw information. So again, another very powerful thing. And you put those two things together, the ability to ingest information and work with it, and then to write about it, you really have something that's very capable of helping you write compelling proposal content if you know how to use the tools effectively. Now, there's certain things you need to be wary of. I'll just give you the quick caution here. Okay. One is the platform still hallucinate. That's the technical term for make stuff up that is not factually true. Okay. You got to be very wary of that. Don't let yourself be seduced by the high quality of writing to say, this is well written. My gosh, I'm going to go ahead and turn it in. Just ask those lawyers who have submitted briefs with GenAI fictional references and court citations and have been caught. GenAI will make stuff up if you tell it to because it does not know fact from fiction. And that's obviously a source of much research and interest these days. The other thing GenAI is not very good at, by the way, is very in-depth, step-by-step type activities. It struggles with things like, find every shall statement in a 100-page document. That's really not its thing if you want to just think of it that way. In order to win, then, you need to take advantage of GenAI's ability to synthesize diverse raw information. And it can do that. You have to set up a library in a secured environment. That should be a feature of your GenAI platform with data about your company, your customers, your competitors, your proprietary data, and give the GenAI access to that information that it can then weave into a high-scoring narrative according to your best practices. That's all perfectly doable. I'm just going to kind of step you through kind of what makes GenAI domain aware. How does it know about BD? Because again, a tool like ChatGPT or Anthropic Claude has enormous broad knowledge of the world, but it's not a specialist in proposal writing. So if you just use a public GenAI chatbot like the two I just mentioned, or Google Gemini, or again, Meta's Llama tool, whichever one, they base their writing on, information and words from public source knowledge that they're what called trained on. It's used to actually create the model and program it for your use. Okay? But it doesn't safeguard your private data, generally speaking. And sometimes it'll make stuff up. It'll hallucinate, as I mentioned a minute ago. So if all you have is the large language model and its front end, back end, there are some liabilities to it. It's not a specialist in GovCon BD. It'll make stuff up. And it's really not necessarily going to protect your private data. Now, you can have a secured environment where your private data is stored and can be injected into the model without risk to your company. Okay, by secured, I mean nobody else's data is going to leak in, your data is not going to leak out. Okay, so you can have one example is you might set up a secured private tenant in Microsoft Azure Cloud. Okay, that's just one example of ways to create a secured tenant. And you then put your data in there. You see the fancy words on the chart here, vectorized database. That's, what happens to your data. It's converted into a natural language representation called a vectorized database. No need to worry about what that is. The point is, once you've done that, your GenAI can actually query. Actually, the GenAI is not querying it. You write a request. Your request actually queries that database of your holdings. Might be your past performance, or your capabilities, or previous black hat assessments. It could be all kinds of stuff that's in there that's private to your company. It will add that information to your request, and that goes into the GenAI model, which then writes it up in response to your request. It's a great way to reduce the potential for hallucination as well. You can also have more advanced models where you can actually train the model on your data. Now, once you start training the model on data, obviously you've trained the model, they got your data in there. The next day, that data starts to age. You can't keep training the model every day, for example. To make your GovCon BD domain aware GenAI platform, you have to also provide information, kind of sample documents and software that enable it to take your request and I will use the term very, very loosely, understand what it is you want. If you're writing a transition plan, if you have contextual embedding, you might have a sample transition plan in there. So your Gen AI can know what good looks like and can follow that model. That's another step in making your Gen AI platform as powerful as possible for being business development domain aware. So now you have a Gen AI that not only writes really, really well, but also has access to your corporate private data that you control. I don't mean to imply it's, going out of control or anything. It's all in an environment that you set up and is secured. Okay. It also has software that enables it to retrieve information, that enables it to respond in a way that shows it knows what good quality GovCon BD products and artifacts look like. So now we're getting really powerful. And by the way, there are any number of products out there, at least 10, 12 products out there that are GovCon BD domain aware platforms. So given that you have this capability, you can build AI into the quality structure I showed you a few charts ago. Up until now, companies are really focused on compliant and responsive. Gen AI can make you faster. The new value proposition is faster and better. You can not only be more productive, get your proposal done in less time with less labor and cost, that you can then, those savings can be reinvested in more proposal work or your indirect rates or whatever, however you want to do that as a company. You can also improve the quality of your bids and presumably win more in doing so. Let me walk you through some of these and how you can use GenAI BD domain-aware platforms in our quality structure. So I mentioned compliant before. Okay, so you have a number of objectives. If you want to be compliant, you have to shred the RFP, find all the requirements, create your outline. You might want to, put that all into a storyboard or content plan template, whatever your company best practice might be. Okay, how can AI, Gen AI, assist you with that? Okay, one is before the RFP is even released, you can ask the Gen AI, you can give it information that will help it speculate on what the requirements might be, or the evaluation criteria, or the instructions. That in turn enables your capture team to focus on the essential issues and begin building solution and capture artifacts in advance of the draft RFP release. And that's very powerful because now you can have an informed, meaningful, value-added discussion with potential customers. With the proposal itself, now your RFP has come in. How can GenAI help you? It can help generate a proposal outline. Again, I'm concerned it's not great at step by step, slog through every statement, every requirement. That's not GenAI's strength. But it can certainly draft a proposal outline for you if you give it, a cogent set of instructions. It can speculate on what customer hot buttons might be, which will then help you populate your content plans or storyboards. It can also speculate on other content or capture artifact content you might want to use. It can help you take an outline and then populate storyboards. Okay. And it can also be used for compliance checking. You can run, the RFP against your requirement set and ask it, okay, do you see this requirement there? Is every requirement addressed? That sort of thing. You can use it for that. Okay. Not really playing to its greatest strengths, but these are ways you can use GenAI to help you. You can generate high quality, responsive content. GenAI knows a lot about a lot of stuff in the broad world, okay, particularly about software and IT and things like that, but not just technical disciplines. If it has access to a corporate private library, it can now start taking your requirements and drafting content in response. Now, is that content going to be winning high scoring content? Not yet. But at least it can be responsive to the question being asked. And how many times have we been on a review team and read a requirement and a response that said, well, the person wrote stuff, but it doesn't really answer the mail on the requirement. It's kind of misunderstood the requirement itself. It's compliant but not responsive, if you want to think of it that way. Okay. GenAI can help you draft and also check content for being responsive. Here's where it gets really interesting. If you want to create a feature-rich, high-scoring proposal, you can use generative AI to create content that is designed around the definition of a strength. So now you are taking features out of your corporate knowledge base or out of research that you've done. You can identify them as discriminators. You can give all the supporting information you need to score as strengths and write it up and inject that into your proposal narrative. And now you are on the path to compelling because you are writing strengths-based narrative, strengths-driven narrative. And you can focus on what differentiates your company, what makes your company better than your competitors, because you can still score lots of strengths and not win. You've got to convince the customer what you're offering is better. Okay? If both companies have 10 strengths, but the customer values the strengths your competitor offered, you're still not going to be successful. You have to focus on what makes your company better than your competitors. And you do that by scoring more strengths. You can ensure that your proposal is customer focused. A classic uh, error in proposal preparation is you write an introductory paragraph about how great the customer and their mission is, and the rest of your proposal is me, 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 me. Okay? You want to write proposal content that focuses on the customer, their mission, and how we can help the customer do better in their mission. And in fact, that's part of how you score strengths, isn't it? By showing the positive impact that you have on the mission through the course of being selected as the awardee. That's part of convincing the evaluators that you are deserving of the award. You need to focus on the customer. And to do that, there are things you need to do in the language and the usage in the narrative. You want to use their language, for instance. You may have internal jargon for different things. You want to use the customer's language, which should be evident in the PWS or the statement of work or in the evaluation criteria or the instructions for preparation. Use their language. By that, I don't mean don't parrot or quote the statement of work back and say, here's how I'm going to satisfy a requirement and give them their stuff back, but use their language choices, use their terms of definition, and keep the focus on them. Focus on benefits, impacts to the mission, impacts to the contract that are positive. Okay? So lots of things that GenAI can do for customer focus. Pre-RFP can help you come up with solution ideas that you vet with the customer. And hopefully through your customer engagements and capture, you're actually generating customer enthusiasm for your ideas to the point where when the RFP is released, the customer is looking forward to reading your proposal and scoring it. In the proposal itself, you can use customer language. You can create a wall of truth, if you're familiar with that term, where you give all of your writers a vocabulary to use and give them the definitions of the words. So everyone's speaking consistently in voice, tone, style, and language. Okay. And GenAI, by the way, can also be set up so when it generates draft content, it is consistent in style and tone. In fact, if you got I think a proposal that you think was really perfectly written, a really fine piece of proposal writing, you can input that to your Gen AI and say, now characterize this for me and make that the standard for your next proposal. So you're consistently writing in a way that you have seen score well in the past. You can tell it what good looks like. You want your proposal to be easy to evaluate. There are techniques in writing. One of them is the Low-Felt technique called SUPS, which stands for Strengths, Understanding, Process, Summary. We teach that in our modern proposal writing class. Okay. There are techniques for writing that make your proposal easy for the evaluator to score. And again, they're not reading, they're scoring. Most evaluators have day jobs they want to get back to, things they've been pulled off of to come do an evaluation and they are eager to get back to, presumably. You want to make it easy provider is to find your strengths, to show that there are no weaknesses, and to show that any potential risks have been mitigated. Okay? There are ways to frame your narrative, to convey that message as quickly and effectively as possible through graphic ideas you can generate, or through the positioning and structure of strength statements that an evaluator can read, give a check mark to, maybe copy into their evaluation score sheet, word for word. Why not? Okay. There's also tables you can generate and other techniques for capturing this information, making it prominent, easy for evaluators to find and score. You do a proposal to be well written. Again, I'm more focused on high scoring. I think well written certainly is an enabler for that. On the other hand, I don't spend days and days and days polishing the prose. I want the strengths to jump off the page. Now, I will say one thing you may have noticed in your internal proposal reviews is that reviewers tend to focus on things that maybe are not that central to creating that high scoring winning proposal. One of them is writing. People are going to want to, change happy to glad in your proposal narrative, or, change this sentence here, make this sentence the last sentence, not the second sentence, that kind of thing. And that certainly is not, not feedback not to be ignored, but it's not feedback that's going to get you to winning. So you can use GenAI not only to help you write well, but help you review effectively by focusing on what's important. Because sometimes people don't know what's important or find it hard to stay focused on what's important. And what's important? High scoring, feature rich, lots of strengths. So well written, good use of customer language, obviously good quality writing, grammar, style, voice, narrative, all that sort of thing. Right? Consistent terminology across volumes. How many times have we had to rewrite portions of one volume because we used an entirely different vocabulary, style, and tone in another volume? Okay? Different writers do different things. You can standardize much of that proposal content generation through a system prompt or other generative AI features. So just as kind of a summary here, our job is not writing proposals. Okay? Our job is writing winning proposals. And focusing on compliance and responsive is certainly essential, but it is not enough. To win, you need to get to compelling. To be compelling allows you to outscore your competitors to win the non-cost score of the evaluation. And if you can win by enough, maybe even charge a premium for that as well. Okay? You can incorporate generative AI into a best practices quality construct in order to ensure that you get the best possible results, effective as possible, that take you from just bidding to winning. So I've kind of outlined this for you. Just about Lowfeld Consulting Group in general. We have a number of books that we've written, got a couple more coming out. I think volume 7 is in work right now, working on that. Lowfeld provides support in a number of areas. We provide subject matter experts, proposals, grants, writing, graphics, desktop publishing, you name it. Okay. We teach classes and we provide support in using generative AI to write proposals, and also beginning to support capture as well, provide reviewers and other capabilities as well to help you win more. Okay, so if you're interested, go ahead and visit the Lowfeld website. You can see the link there. And I encourage you to begin your generative AI. If you haven't already, begin your generative AI journey. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you from the APMP Chesapeake chapter. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. But I'm going to ask you just one question. Bruce, if someone is just starting out on their AI journey and, they're looking at different platforms and things like that, what would the 3 things that you suggest that they do?
Yeah. Well, I tell people, I don't tell people, I recommend to people that when they're looking at GenAI platforms, that they consider a number of different aspects of the platform. Okay. One is, I'm a big believer that if you're going to use a GenAI platform, it should be built around the GenAI itself. There are a number of commercial products out there that have kind of GenAI as a bolt-on, and that may work. I think it's inefficient, and there may be cost implied in that as well. So I think it's really important you have a GenAI-centered platform. You have to have a secured environment. Now, the one I'm most familiar with is what they call the single tenant environment. You can also have GenAI installed in your premises behind your firewall, or hosted on your private client area or private tenant as well. Those ways to keep your data secure, but that's very, very important. I strongly recommend against writing your proposals on a public platform. I'll beg you now, don't do that. right? Don't put your proprietary data or your PII, personally identifiable information, out into the public domain. Okay. And the third thing is cost and usability and support. What is it you're going to get? How much is it going to cost? And is your platform going to be supported? If you run into a problem at at 2 in the morning when the proposal's due Monday, right? Who's there to help you out? Yeah, I think it becomes a very, very important question. There are a number of different business models for AI. There's software as a service where you buy a seat, where you buy a certain number of licenses for a prescribed annual fee or monthly fee or whatever it might be. That's one way to acquire the capability. There are vendors out there who actually will sell you the model, okay, which you then take over, and presumably you can buy a support package of some sort to maintain it, but you take ownership of the model. There are pluses and minuses to that as well. And again, you got to consider the cost versus performance trade-off. So Brent, I would list those three things as front of mind for when you're starting to talk to vendors about, acquiring a platform and how you might want to use it and how much you want to spend.
I really like to thank you on behalf of the APMP Chesapeake chapter. We will be putting a recording of this up on our YouTube channel shortly. So thank you to everyone who attended today, and we will see you at APMP Bid and Proposal Con in a few weeks. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.